And I seem to recall, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to recall around 1970 when Crosby, Stills, and Nash began getting very popular, Stephen Stills put the word out that he was looking for an old D45. And it was my understanding that he overpaid for some of these guitars because he just would outbid people, and that kind of started the price spiraling upwards. Is there any
Well, he
truth
certainly
to that?
had some impact. It was not him alone, but certainly he and Neil Young did indeed collect vintage guitars, with Stills more so even than Neil. But as to whether he truly overpaid or not, other people were paying it too.
Okay.
And I sold him one. It was right around '74 or so. I sold him one, I think, for $8,000, which was the most I'd ever sold a guitar for at that time, and about as much as I'd ever heard of anybody paying for one at that time.
Yeah, was that his 1942?
Quite honestly, I don't remember the year.
He had a couple of them. He had a 39 and a 42. And
well, it was a nice enough guitar, but the interesting thing is the very day he bought that from me, I bought another one for $1,500.
Oh gosh, that's.
I had located one in St. Louis, and I was tied up selling it to Stills, selling one, and I had my wife go to St. Louis and pick up the other one and pay the guy the $1,500 for it.
Must have needed that pretty bad.
So I wanted to make sure that deal closed before the guy changed his mind.
Yeah. Well, you made out well on that one, boy. And recently you had a couple in here that moved through your store. They're no longer here, but you had, I think, one that was David Bromberg's and maybe another one.
Now, the one that was Bromberg's was in pretty rough shape.
Yeah, from the pictures it looked a
It was
little.
a 1938, but it had multiple cracks. Now, I do have style 45s here. Like here's
Yeah.
a 1926 single 45, which is a great guitar.
That's in beautiful condition.
It's in fine condition. It's got just as much ornamentation as anybody's
Yeah.
D45, and it's the same quality guitar as a D45. It's
Yeah.
just smaller.
Yeah.
This
and-
is what Joan Baez played.
Right.
Still
right.
has hers, and it's a great sounding guitar.
I heard a story about hers. It was stolen a long time ago and mysteriously returned on a Greyhound bus and arrived anonymously at her home after it had been stolen. Someone had a change of heart or a pang of conscience, or maybe somebody else rescued it, and it was mysteriously returned. But but see, I guess another thing is that if you want to collect a guitar, if you can't afford a Dreadnought or something really very, very expensive, I guess you could go down a size or two and maybe get something for a little bit less. Like,
Yeah, although while this is less than a D45, it's still $40,000.
yeah, I guess I had an 042, a 1923, back about 30 years ago. I sure wish I kept it. I paid, and I traded a Gibson F4 mandolin for it, straight across. And anyway, it's just another instrument that kind of got away. I've never really been a collector. I'm more of a player, and I usually have used instruments to leverage myself into getting other instruments I wanted more, and sometimes I have not made the best deals. Well, gosh, while we're at it, George, I wanted to ask you about how your store grew. I mean, you started off with, did you always have a store in Nashville? And then,
Well, I never had a store before this.
oh, okay.
I never had a job other than this, with the exception in 1967 I had a summer job working at my father's pathology lab.
Mm-hmm.
I did blood chemistry work, and I did also set up the first electrophoresis setup for separating blood serum protein fractions. I did it, not that I didn't invent electrophoresis, but I did the first setup at Skokie Valley Hospital, where
Wow.
my father was the pathologist and lab director, so I set up their first system. But I didn't like doing it especially.
Mm-hmm.
Chemistry has never been my favorite subject, but that was the only job I'd ever had, which
Mm-hmm.
was like a regular 9 to 5 type job of going in, actually having employee. I don't like being an employee. I'm not temperamentally suited to it. I'm okay, I guess, temperamentally being the boss, but I'm not temperamentally suited to being an employee. So I'd be a lousy employee. I don't like being told what to do and when to do it, and how to do it. I just like to sit around and think. And I can think and wheel and deal and do things. I mean, I do a lot of appraisals, and of course, for a normal day, I'll do a minimum of 50 emails and frequently 100 emails in a day,
wow,
and phone calls and personal meetings with people. And, so I'm active. It's not that I don't work hard. I say I would be a lousy employee. It doesn't mean I would be lazy. It just means, I said, I don't like being told what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. I sort of march to my own beat. And if all other folks here operated exactly like I do, it wouldn't work. But not everybody is temperamentally a quirky, not everybody's as quirky as I am. And the world wouldn't function if they were, so that's okay.
Well, it's okay because you've built up an incredible business here. You have a 4-story building, and I understand the top floor is devoted entirely to repairs.
And the first floor is the main public showroom. The second floor, where we are right now, is some of the high-dollar specialty items on display.
Right.
You have a room full of them, but we also have a photo room here. We have two secretarial office, we have a bookkeeping office, we have my office, we have Walter Carter's office, who's my right-hand person, so
right,
articles and books and appraisals. Business manager, Christy, is in the office back there, the accounting, but she's far more than just a bookkeeper. She is truly the business manager, and she's also the secretary of the corporation. But that's a title that doesn't mean much one way or the other. At one point she asked me, since she's the manager, should she have a title above secretary? I said, well, Joseph Stalin was only the secretary of the party. Your title's just as good as his. Do you want title or do you want power? And so so much for titles. We don't worry a whole lot about titles here. It's not that big an outfit. We have 4 floors and 24 people.
24 people.
But that's I'm not under the delusion that we're running something the size of General Electric or General Motors or AIG, but some of those aren't so successful.
Yeah, you've never needed.
There have been periods when Gruhn Guitars have been more successful than at least 2 of those.
Yeah, you've never needed any bailouts or anything like that.
No, I've had times in very recent periods when I've been far more profitable than either General Motors, AIG, or for a period even Bank of America, although Bank of America currently seems to be making more than they. For a while they weren't. So, but there was a period when I could rattle off the names of at least a dozen very, very large corporations, and I can truthfully say I was more profitable than all of them combined.
That must be a pretty good feeling.
Well, it's actually a pretty weird feeling.
Yeah, well, you're good.
Rather than good, I'll only say that the only reason that statement was true was things were a horrible mess, and no, it wasn't good, really.
Yeah. Gosh. Well, George, I wanted to ask you more of a technical question. I notice on the wall here you have a Lloyd Loar F5 from July 9th, 1923, and then you have a 1925 Gibson F5, which sometimes, if it's a very early 25, is referred to as an unsigned Loar.
It's built exactly like a Loar, and the factory work order badge is the same as some of the last Loars.
Wow. Yeah, I played one today that Tom Ellis had. It was a very early 25. But what changes took place when Lloyd Loar left the company, or was escorted off the out of the company? I understand it may have been slightly acrimonious as far as his departure. Was there an immediate difference in the types of construction techniques Gibson was using, or the lacquer or finishes?
Well, it does appear that it took very, very little time before they changed the inlay patterns. So it was like this here,
Yeah, with the fern
inlay, and the finish is a different color and it is a different formula. Those are varnish, and this has at least a lacquer component. It's not the same lacquer as they were using in the 30s, but it is certainly a different finish chemically than they were using. This one, just chemically and in color, is different than what they were using on the lower models. And they do sound different.
Yeah, so they didn't waste any time in making changes.
Well, the other thing that was happening is that demand for mandolins had collapsed.
Right.
Even the lures were not commercially successful.
Yes, they were expensive at the time.
That's not why.
Oh, that's not why.
The problem was that the mandolin orchestra boom simply fizzled out and died by 1921.
Yes.
So you don't see very many 22 mandolins. You see plenty up to 1921 and including 1921. And by 22, you see this dramatic reduction, and you see very, very few with 22 serial numbers. And it's because that's when Dixieland was coming in and people weren't playing guitar at all as much. They were playing tenor banjo. And you do see banjo production starting to go up, but you sure as heck don't see mandolins. And it would be like coming up with the best buggy whip in the world after the invention of the automobile. It didn't matter how good the mandolin was. People didn't want an F5 because they didn't want a mandolin.
Yeah, it's ironic that the greatest mandolin ever made on the face of the earth came about at a time when mandolin, the popularity of the mandolin orchestra had just pretty much just disappeared. And
but if you think about that, that's true of a lot of items. This was an attempt to kickstart mandolin sales when it was an exercise in frustration and futility. It didn't matter how good the mandolin would be. It's similar to the flathead master tone banjos. It didn't really come out until the 30s, at which time the Dixieland era was over and the big band era was starting, and coming out with a superior banjo design made no difference. People didn't want a banjo. So the flathead master tones are very rare. They were not commercially successful in the 30s. The only people who would have appreciated one would have been country players, known as hillbillies back then. And the one thing about the hillbillies was that they had no money. And it's not really great to try to build an expensive, high-grade product with a clientele that has no money. So Gibson sold lots of mandolins from the turn of the century on up through 21 to people in the North for mandolin orchestras playing semi-classical, some strict classical, some pop material, but not country. You look at the pictures of those old mandolin orchestras, and they're very much like bowed instrument orchestras, and the people are wearing suits or even tuxedos, and they're just trying to look like a classical orchestra. And hillbillies didn't do that. They had no money. And these mandolins and the later Gibson banjos were not cheap.
Yeah.
The F5, when it first came out, was $200 in 22, and then promptly went up to $250, and that was without the case. So you're talking about the F5 with a case was right on about $300, and that was a huge amount of money. That's 3 times the price of a Martin Herringbone D28, which didn't even exist yet in 1923, but that was a lot of money in 23. Martin didn't have any guitar in their catalog that was that kind of money yet. Even by 28, a 0045 Martin was 175. It was 170. And I remember the Gibson L10 guitar, which is a plain archtop, stark-looking dot inlays, script B. Gibson on the peg head, and very very simple binding, black finish, didn't even show the wood. That was $170.
Wow.
No, that was $175.
It's a little more than the 00045.
$5 more than the 00045.
And what's more collectible today? My goodness.
Well, the 00045 today would bring $75,000, $80,000.
Yeah.
At their peak, some of them were pushing 100. And the L10, I have an L10 next room over. It's a great guitar. It's one I personally enjoy playing. But I wouldn't take $10,000 for my L10 because it's an extremely early example. I couldn't go out and find another one. So far as could I easily get 10 for it, that would be a push.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who's ever paid $10,000 for an L10. But for sure, although it cost $5 more than the 00045, it would have been a better investment to buy it than the 00045 for that matter. Look at a Gibson Super 400, which in the 30s, with case, was $400, when you could buy a D28 for $100 or a D45 for $200, and a really, really nice mid-30s D28 will bring 100,000 or even a bit more, and that Super 400 from the mid-30s is pretty tough to get over 15,000 for.
Yeah.
And a D45, you could have gotten two D40. You can get 300,000 for a D45. So, I mean, for the $400, you could have gotten two D45s, which today you could probably sell for 600,000 for the pair.
Yeah.
And the two Super 400s you might sell for $30,000, or if they were really, really nice enough, you might get 35,000 for the pair. But the cost of an item when new does not necessarily happen to be closely correlated to what it'll bring used 40, 50, 60 years later.
Yeah.
Some things become highly collectible, and others which may have cost more when new, maybe no one's looking for them now.
Yeah, really. No one. Yeah, and like the old dreadnoughts are the things
Well,
that
people want old dreadnoughts, they want flathead master tones,
Yeah.
they
want these guys.
F5s, and in electric guitars, they want Gibson Les Paul models, particularly late 50s Sunburst Les Pauls. They won't pay near as much for a Les Paul Custom, which cost more, and it was new. The Les Paul Custom was $375. The Les Paul Standard was $265. The really nice example of a Les Paul Standard could bring $200,000 plus.
Wow.
And a really nice Les Paul Custom these days is not even, certainly not more than a third as much, and would actually be hard to sell for a third as much, even though it costs more when new.
Wow.
But there's plenty of other examples.